This is the Core Outdoors Podcast, and my name is Christian Rawls. This podcast is for entrepreneurs in the outdoor industry. Whether you're a startup or a seasoned veteran, this show's mission is to deliver actual insights and new perspectives for the people working in the outdoor industry. This show is a production of CORE, the Kootenay Outdoor Recreation Enterprise. CORE is based in the Kootenay region of British Columbia and is a nonprofit grassroots organization dedicated to makers and creators in the outdoor industry. To learn more about CORE, you can find a link to the website in the show notes. This episode is a conversation with Cassie Abel, the founder and CEO of Wild Rye. Wild Rye designs outdoor clothing specifically for women, with a focus on performance, fit, and style. Wild Rye is a market leader in women's mountain bike and cycling apparel, and as we discussed in this episode, they will soon be making waves in the snow sports category when they launch their first outerwear collection this fall. When I started this podcast a year ago, Cassie was at the top of my list of the people I wanted to interview on the show. As you'll hear in this conversation, Cassie has built a strong brand by building a community of customers and industry supporters. She's rewriting the story of who the outdoor industry is for and what it means to lead with purpose. If you want to hear more from Cassie, I highly recommend you check out the episode that she did on the Second Nature podcast. There's a link to it in the show notes. Also, this conversation was recorded in early March, and we purposely didn't get into the tariff conversation. If you're on LinkedIn, it's worth following Cassie, as she's had some very insightful opinions on the current situation, and she's a person worth listening to, because Wild Rye, like many other companies, are being rocked by the chaos being created with the U.S. tariff gong show. Okay, that was quite the preamble. Let's get into it. Enjoy this conversation with Cassie Abel. Where I wanted to start off, because I'm really interested in place and how place builds us as founders and also as brands. And you came to a kind of a critical decision you had to make in your career when you were working with Smith Optics and then they decided to leave and relocate to Portland. And you had to make a decision to stay in Ketchum. And it seems like now that I look at Wild Rye and the branding and just the story of the brand, Ketchum plays a really big role in like who you are as a founder. And I'm just curious, like, what is it about Ketchum and what is it about you there and building the brand there that really sparks for you?
That's a great question. Let's see. So many things. I partially grew up here in Ketchum, so it's always had a huge part of my heart. I lived here when I was 8 years old. We moved back to Seattle, but I was always drawn to the mountains from there on out. I just felt at home in the mountains. I felt like my healthiest, my most energetic in the mountains. And so, yeah, when Smith decided to move, it was honestly one of the toughest decisions I've ever made. In fact, anyone who was around me during that time knows that I didn't make my final decision until the day our decision was due. My now husband, my boyfriend at the time, thought I was moving to Portland when I left for work that morning. And there was just something tugging at my heart that said, no, you can't do this. And so, yeah, I took a huge risk. I had no idea what I was going to do to pay my bills in order to stay here. And from that day forward, I was pretty committed to creating professional opportunities for young people here in the Valley. You know, a lot of ski towns have some major brands, and with Smith's departure, we were losing a huge chunk of that. And so I wanted to create opportunities for young people to live and work and thrive here in the Valley.
That's very cool.
So,
is that a style? Yeah. So you basically made, I'm just going to call it a gut decision on that day, it sounds like. Is that your decision-making style typically?
Yes. I lead with my gut and my heart on just about everything I do. So hopefully there's some data to back it up, but generally speaking, I would like to pride myself in pretty great instincts when push comes to shove. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I have some questions for you about decision-making that I'll get into later, but it's interesting that that's a cool part of your story that basically on the day of you decide to go with your gut. Well, from the outside, it looks like it's turned out to be a good decision.
Yeah, it definitely was the right decision for me. I am so grateful to still be here and have just such easy access to the mountains. I'm a healthier person as a result of it. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest and I just don't jive with that weather. I don't leave the house when it's gray. It's kind of gray today. It was hard to get out of the house. Cool. And so I knew that I'm just a healthier person when it's sunny and access to the mountains is easy. So
yeah, which is important when you're a busy person running a brand and doing all the things you want to do. If we can decrease the commute time to get to the trail, then I think we'll have a better chance of doing it. Good.
100%.
And what was your
Yep.
role at Smith?
I was global communications.
Okay.
So when I first started, I was overseeing PR communications, all of our ad buy and social media. So it was a lot in the early days, and I was learning on the fly for sure. I mean, I had some background in marketing, but each of those different categories or departments were pretty big jobs within itself. So
No
yeah.
kidding. And you didn't jump from Smith to launching Wild Rye. You've had a period where you were basically a consultant or independent contractor for, like, what was that? Were you doing a similar work for other brands?
Yeah, exactly. So when I decided to stay in Sun Valley, I started putting my feelers out for, outdoor brands that might need PR and marketing services. And my first client was Visit Sun Valley, which was great. Anchored here in Sun Valley, promoting, healthy tourism to the valley. And then the other two early brands that I brought on were Howler Brothers and Dinafit. And it was just a great fit to be launching my new endeavor. But during that time, pretty early on, is when I connected with my now former business partner, Katie. And she was telling me about what she was thinking. And I was coming at it from a similar lens of, there's needs to be a better option for women, for female athletes in the outdoors. And why not us?
Yeah. And
So
you were coming at it from the brand communication side? What was she complimentary? Did she bring
yeah, so
complementary
she
skills?
was much more operational, financially driven, more methodical, less driven by her gut instincts and more driven by numbers and data. And so she was at Specialized Bicycle Components at the time. And so we were both coming at it from both a bike and ski lens. We were both, sort of passionate skiers first and foremost, but worked pretty heavily in the bike industry. So, but yeah, we were very complimentary in those early days.
Right. And I've known Wild Rye mainly as a bike apparel brand, but that's not necessarily the case. You've been making base layers for a very long time too, and now we're going to talk about it in a little bit. But you're now launching a snow outerwear line this fall, which is very
Mm-hmm.
exciting. When
Yeah.
when you and Katie were starting it, did you mean to start with bike and then you were going to jump right into snow, or did you say no, we're going to do bike and then kind of slowly over time?
Our plan has always been to be in bike and snow from pre-launch. That was always our goal. We wanted to be a multi-sport brand, and bike definitely took off really fast. So it ate up a lot of our time, and we sort of went with it. We let the the industry tell us where the success was going to come first, and so we've always had base layers. We've always planned to get into outerwear and a greater snow collection. It just took 8 years of dreaming and finding the right partners and building up critical mass and great retail partnerships and right consumer base to invest in that category, because it is a really big investment to get into outerwear.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that product development specifically.
Hmm.
But maybe a good place to start is actually that first product launch for bike for Wild Rye. It sounded like I've listened to you on other podcasts talk about it, and it's probably one for the record books of lessons to be learned. And like, so you think you want to start an apparel company. And I'm
Mhm.
really curious I'd love to hear more about the story, because not only did you have some flaws with the product, you also had kind of in that same time, like a cease and desist on the name that you were coming out with that wasn't Wild Rye at the time. So yes, love to hear about the
Mhm.
story, but I'm really curious about how you were dealing with that, and like what were the things that you were feeling as the founder, and then how did you kind of push through?
Yeah. Oh gosh. You're asking me to dig way back into my memory. I have mom brain, so I don't really reserve much room in my brain for anything that isn't an immediate need. But
You could
yeah,
tell
I
the
mean, full
story and
pan.
what rises to the top after you tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, full panic. We had been waiting for months for our product to deliver. They were about 4 months late in delivering the product to begin with. So when, we excitedly started opening boxes, and, Katie was the one that actually opened the boxes because all the products shipped to her in Tahoe. And she called me. She's like, "You're not going to believe this. All the chamois leg bands are sewn on inside out. So the silicone's on the outside. Like, what the fuck?" are we going to do? Like, how are we going to do this? It's already so much more expensive than we planned. We can't launch with product like this. And to make matters worse, the waistbands on our bike shorts are an inch out of spec. So a medium is fitting more like a large. So we've got a whole communication problem to accompany that one. So yeah, I mean, full panic. We're like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? We have no business doing this. We have no leverage. We have no cash. So yeah, I'd say that's what we were feeling, was just complete deflation and panic.
And then when did the cherry on top of the name, the brand that you're coming out with, when did you have to say goodbye to that? Was that before the first product launch or right after you started to re-sew?
Right after. So,
awesome.
So we got the chamois vans re-sewn on and corrected, and we got to launch. I think we launched August 9th, 2016. And within a week of that, maybe a week and a half, we got a cease and desist for our brand name. And, I have to say, it was about the friendliest possible cease and desist order we've ever gotten. It was a nice conversation. They were very, kind and gracious about understanding we were a new business and maybe didn't know better. But they basically said, we have you have to get through this inventory pretty quickly and we'll let you continue to sell it. And Katie and I had basically a self-inflicted deadline to change the name within a week of that cease and desist, because we owed our suppliers artwork for our trims for our base layer collection. And we decided that we absolutely needed the new name on that before we got too far down the road. So
well,
we
had a week. That you got the big panics over with early, right? It's been smooth sailing since, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, totally. There hasn't been a blip in the road ever since.
Nice.
Yeah, right.
And it's interesting because that product run, your first product run, was all made in a U.S. factory, or maybe a couple of U.S. factories. And I've heard you talk about that factory unfortunately did not stand behind and partner with you in any way. They kind of just threw you under the bus and said it's your problem to deal with. What are your thoughts on domestic manufacturing? Because I know that you have some opinions and I'd love to hear them, because it is definitely a topic of conversation at the moment. And so tell me about your experiences beyond that, and what maybe other experiences that you've heard from other people in the industry, and where that leads you on your opinions for North American manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, I am certainly no expert. There are people that know way more about U.S. manufacturing, but from personal experience, I won't touch it. This was one example of poor communication. We didn't know, they didn't communicate with us on timelines. We didn't know, when to expect product. It took forever to get a clear answer from them. The product came back flawed. There wasn't a whole lot of collaboration. And then they took zero accountability on some of these mistakes that were made. So yeah, I mean, after that, we were pretty down on U.S. manufacturing. I will say I gave U.S. manufacturing another shot probably 3 or 4 years ago. We were trying to make our own blanks for cotton t-shirts. So, we thought, okay, it's simple enough. There's not a lot of ways you can mess this up. So we created the pattern. We had a fit that we really liked. We found, factory partners that our designer had worked with before, and they, made the t-shirts fine. But without consulting with us, they sent all the t-shirts to our office rather than to our warehouse. And they didn't have any of our like size labels printed on them, which was something they were supposed to do. And they were like, oh, well, the printer was closed until next week, and I just wanted to ship them to you. And we're like, okay, well, the printer's 3 doors down from you in LA, and you just shipped all this product to us that now has to be shipped back to you. And again, no accountability. So, we did give it another shot, and I just think there's a breakdown in the skill set and the accountability of U.S. manufacturing, at least from my experience. And so yeah, it'll be hard to convince me to manufacture much in the U.S. in the future.
Yeah, I mean, based on this experience,
we paid the price.
Yeah, I can't blame you. And I think there's domestic manufacturers are running on tighter margins, and they have high labor costs, so they can't just have back office staff that you do overseas, where you have, you can have multiple
Yeah.
layers of QC and project management and all these things that you get at an overseas factory, just because their margins are bigger and they have more capacity from a personnel
Yeah.
standpoint.
Our
So
quality is exponentially higher with our overseas partners. I
yeah,
mean, not only is the communication better, we have clear merchandising, there's a clear structure, there's great communication. We get a whip report every other week, but the quality is just far superior
yeah,
from our experience.
yeah. I mean, it is a reality, though. We want to do as much domestic manufacturing as you can, especially when you're doing technical apparel and dealing with stretchy fabrics and all this stuff, right? It just starts to get to a new level.
Yeah, well, and I mean, Mallory from Ewer, I've, talked to her a bunch, and she's getting crazy tariffs on importing her fabrics because we are not equipped in the US to manufacture the fabrics that are required for technical apparel. So even if you're manufacturing in the US, you're still paying the price to a point where you can't afford to produce here, because those fabrics are being taxed so heavily. So
Yeah.
there's a breakdown in our logic here.
Yeah. We'll just leave it at that for the,
Mm-hmm.
the time.
We will.
Um, so you've obviously have lots of different factory relationships over the previous years. And how do you go about vetting those new relationships now? So when you're going to go find a new factory to work with, do you have kind of a standard operating procedures? Like, okay, what are the questions you'd like to ask, and any advice you have for people? Because, a lot of people listening to this podcast are looking for factories to work with. So what advice do you have about how to vet them and kind of foster those relationships?
Yeah, I mean, we've had the best luck with referrals. So referrals from respected industry partners or friends who have been able to guide us in the direction of factories that they respect, that they've had good experiences working with. We also have vendor compliance manuals that we require them to run through with us and sign off on in order to proceed. So, there's a level of like our expectations out there in the upfront, and then getting really great referrals. We're still not at the stage where we can go travel around and visit every potential factory. So a lot of it is done via email and Zoom calls and whatnot. And then we go through a sampling process. And if it hits our quality standards, then we continue to move forward. But, there's a lot of check boxes that need to be checked before we even get to that point.
Do you have a walk before they run? I mean, I know the sampling or maybe the development process helps with that, but do you kind of have a walk before you run process to kind of trial some factories? Just before you kind of jump in with huge, massive POs, like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we typically will move a couple SKUs over to a new factory or start development from scratch on a new category or product with a new factory. I mean, I say that we are still pretty darn consolidated. We have 3 primary factories that are, we have selected based on their category. One that's really strong with merino, one that's really strong with technical product in general. They've done a lot of bike industry products, so we trust them with chamois and bike shorts. And then we have a new factory that we were working with on outerwear. So, we're not going to go ahead and move our whole product collection over to a new factory overnight. It's a slow and methodical process, and we're really happy with our partners. So I can't imagine diversifying too much until we need to get to the point of duplication, and we're just not that size yet.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, like Wild Rye has obviously been growing in your history, and you're growing and taking over, market share from other people, which is congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But you're still not at that level of where you can kind of come in with brand name recognition from the factory side and say, you can't just like drop your name and everybody's like, ooh, hold on, roll out the red carpet. When you're kind of that small and now moving into that medium-sized brand, how do you put your elbows up and create that space within the factory so that you can get them, get their attention and get them to want to work with you?
Yeah. Again, I think it comes down to how the introduction's facilitated. Coming from, it's just like fundraising or pretty much anything else, a warm intro goes a really long way and gets the factories to pay attention to us. With the folks we've been working with for a long time, we've built really great partnership. And so they've seen us continue to grow, and we continue to hammer home and, relay back the numbers and the percentage of growth that we've had with each of their factories over the years. And that's helped a lot. But it really the warm intro goes a really, really long ways.
That's a good tip. I want to talk. You mentioned it a second ago. Your former co-founder, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when she decided to leave and parted ways. And I listened to your conversation with Aaron on the Second Nature podcast, and you talked about how you were, kind of customer interfacing and doing the sales and going to trade shows and getting that feedback, and you were kind of feeling the buzz and the momentum of the brand, though maybe your books and the back end didn't necessarily reflect that same story.
Mm-hmm.
When she decided
I don't think any early apparel business says, yes, you're doing it right and keep going.
Yes, very, very good point. Thank you.
I think that's true for just about any startup apparel business. So
yes,
I'm sure I've got some other founders that will back me up on that. So you kind of have to go off your gut. But anyways, I just interrupted you.
Thank you for
so
clarifying that.
proceed.
Is very true. I appreciate that. So with that being said, if you get the feeling, the buzz, the gut is telling you we're onto something, but the data isn't backing it up. And then your co-founder just says, this isn't for me. I need to move on. And she has her reasons, and those are all valid and good. Were you questioning your decision? How did you move through that process of making the decision like, no, I'm going to double down, and literally have to double down because now it's all your money and all your time. You don't get to share the load with anybody. What was that decision-making process like?
I had very little hesitation, to be honest. This was one of those things that I could feel in my bones was the right thing to do. And I think I approach everything with optimism, and Katie has a healthy amount of pessimism with some of her approaches to things. She was pretty risk adverse, at least in this entrepreneurial endeavor. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm a former team sports athlete where it's just sort of like, go. I don't know how else to explain it. Like, I lead with heart and my gut, and like I said earlier, my instincts have treated me well so far. But yeah, I mean, I was devastated. I mean, I was coming off of, some events that had me riding high and really excited about the future of Wild Rye. And Katie sat me down via phone call, right after some of those really energizing events for me, and was like, I see two options. I think I personally am too risk adverse for this. I miss skiing. I want to go back to skiing and have, a slightly simpler life, teach and, be able to go to bed and not be stressed out all night. And all the respect in the world for her knowing that about herself and, what she wanted out of her future. But yeah, I mean, it was scary, and, I'm grateful. I have parents who I talk to about just about everything. So called my family and was like, I believe in this. What do I do? Like, let me talk out loud for a bit. And they've always put their emotional support behind anything that I was passionate about, whether it was my lacrosse career through college and, my move back to Sun Valley for Smith or whatever. They've been there and been my biggest cheerleaders and supporters. So, with them sort of giving me a little nod of, we trust you, go for it, I felt pretty confident moving forward.
That's cool. That's great.
So very grateful to mom and dad.
Yeah, which is, it's a blessing to be able to have that.
I'm
support.
fortunate, very fortunate.
For sure. In that time, you were running Wild Rye, but you're running a consulting day job. And Wild Rye was like the passion project, but it wasn't necessarily the income project. Mm-hmm. How many years did you and Katie stay together as co-founders?
We were in it together until end of 2018, early 2019. So for about 2.5 years after launch.
And then when did you make the decision to go all in Wild Rye and cease kind of outside consulting work and say, this is it, I'm doing it?
Spring of 2020. So it was deep in the pandemic, and I just had a baby. So I had a 2 or 3 month old baby, and I was pretty worn out. Not going to lie. My baby came about a month early, so I wasn't prepared to take any form of leave. So I was working through those early days of being a mom, and I had a handful of clients come to me and with concerns about what was going to happen. PR is an easy first cut. I had several brands that were like, hey, we're worried about budgets. And I was very happy to say, you know what, take a break. I know we have a contract. I'm good. I need it. I'm fine. So let's pause and we can revisit in a couple months when we know how things are going to shake out. When, July hit and the whole outdoor industry was booming and brands were feeling pretty bullish about where we were going, had some brands come back to me and wanted to re-engage. And at that point, I was so deep in Wild Rye and was just like, I'm done, but I can give you great other PR people.
So, wow. To put it in context, you had just had your first child, you said?
Mm-hmm.
So you had your first child, you lost all your clients, you were in the middle of a global pandemic, and you were running a brand on your own.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
get shit done. I can see that in you now.
I just will things to happen. It's just like sheer force. I'm pretty good at sticking round pegs in square holes.
Is that it? Is that your style? Is your style brute force?
I mean, there's a little brute force here for sure. That dates back to my lacrosse days.
Sure.
So.
Well, that good sport for that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to ask you about this later, but it seems let's talk about it now. So we're going to fast forward a little bit. Like, how many children do you have now?
I just have one.
Just one.
Yeah,
Okay.
that pretty much.
That's great. Yeah. Well, you have a Wild Rye and the biological child.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And Sawyer. Yeah.
And what's it like being a mom and a founder of a rapidly growing business?
It's really fun. I mean, I'm fortunate. Like you mentioned earlier, I'm in this place where I don't have to commute. My kid's school is about 2 blocks from my office. And so, we have a pretty good cadence. I get Sawyer to school every morning. My husband picks him up, and they oftentimes stop by the office at 4:30 to say hi. And, it's pretty cool to see this little boy growing up knowing that mom's the boss. And and yeah, I mean, it's certainly hard. I travel a lot and have to, negotiate childcare and there are all the wrinkles, but I'm pretty proud to be here making a huge difference for women and having this little boy see me as he grows up, making what I want out of my life and making a better future as much as I can. So
He's
yeah,
lucky.
but it's hard.
Yeah.
Feel like a crazy person most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have high output, it seems like, based on what we've talked about so far. You do have a high output. And I ask people about this, and I don't think there's a right answer. I think people have their own opinions on it. People talk about like work-life balance, and some people say, oh yeah, you have to have a balance. And some people say, actually, there is no balance. You just have to embrace it. Like, what's your perspective on that from kind of parenting and founderhood?
Yeah. I don't think you can ever have a perfect balance. I think there are times when work needs me more and times when my family needs me more, and knowing that that's going to ebb and flow and sort of taking it in stride, taking it day by day, week by week as to what the balance needs to be. I think, yeah, there's the work-life balance, but then there's also the personal balance of getting exercise and taking care of myself, which is something that I didn't do for a really long time. I was really neglecting my fitness, and I found that I declined both as a partner, mom, and business leader as a result. So I'd say it's a complex balance, and it's never going to be in perfect harmony or equilibrium. But yeah, just taking the needs on a week by week basis.
Do you have some routines or disciplines around that kind of like taking care of the physical part of things?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a class girl. Like I said, I'm a team sports alumni and I like being yelled at. So I go to a class, not yelled at, but I like to be coached and told to try harder.
Sure.
But I have a local gym called the Mill that is just high energy. You're thoroughly worked after 45 minutes or an hour, a mix of treadmill and boot camp. And I put it on my calendar, and my team knows that this is sacred time, and meetings will not be scheduled during the mill.
Nice. That's good.
So,
That's what you have
yeah.
to do. It's your calendar. Your calendar will always tell everybody around you and yourself what your priorities are.
Yes, my calendar is everything. I live and die by my calendar. Yeah. So
that's good. It gets you where you want to go. So in 2020, you were a team of one, and now today, 2025, you're a team of how many?
10 or 11.
Okay.
Full time, and some long time contractors as well. So
yeah.
Yeah.
That's That's a pretty rapid growth.
Yeah.
What have been the big challenges you've encountered as you've grown Wild Rye? And then what advice would you give based on those challenges that you've experienced?
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I don't even know where to begin.
Just riff. Let's hear it.
uh, I would say I'm learning to be a better hirer. Hiring is a skill and a talent. And I, made some hires that were really draining for me over the years. And I have some characteristics that I now look for in everyone and that I didn't have defined or wasn't aware of in some of my earlier hires. I'd say people management is the hardest thing I do. No question, because everyone has individual needs, everyone has different work styles, everyone, you know, needs something different out of their days, weeks, years, their benefit packages, everyone. Yeah. So, and you're dealing with human beings who I genuinely care about. And yeah, so I think learning to be a manager in that way was really hard, but I've come to accountability as my number one criteria is someone who can take accountability for mistakes or, and communicate that accountability. So
How do you
yeah,
screen
that's
for
become
accountability?
a lot of references, backdoor references. Call
Gotcha.
anyone you know who knows these people. Sorry, guys. I know a
Yeah.
lot more about you than you know.
Full FBI background search.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm a desktop FBI agent.
Okay, good. Well, that's good. That's a good tip. So you
Yeah.
mentioned character hiring for specific characteristics. So accountability is being one of those characteristics. Are there any other
Mhm.
characteristics that kind of come to top of mind when you go to hire?
I think hiring has evolved for us too. In the very early days, I needed people who were willing to just do a whole lot of things, had enough knowledge about a couple different departments. And now that we've evolved and we have clear department separation it's not perfect. We still wear a lot of hats, but having some experts in their field is important as we've continued to grow. I think understanding what you need. And I think in the really early days, I had a mentor basically hand me a spreadsheet and was like, okay, fill out everything that gives you energy, everything that drains your energy, and everything. I can't remember what the third column was, but basically writing this all down. And you need to hire for what drains your energy. So for me, it's like operational stuff, the nitty gritty. So hiring for your weaknesses.
And then, I mean, I have my assumptions, but I don't want to go on them. What's in that column of what gives you energy and what are your strengths?
Brand, standing for something, making an impact, great product. Yeah, that's the stuff that really gives me energy. So the marketing brand side of the business, the partnerships, and the product.
So on the product side, we mentioned earlier that you're launching outerwear, snow outerwear for the first time this fall,
Mm-hmm.
and we've been able to see a sneak peek of the product, and it looks very cool. Tell me a little bit about how you have approached. I know it's taking you years in the makings to make this happen, which is
Mm-hmm.
that's what happens for everybody. It takes a long time to come out with new products. So how do you think about SKU expansion, not only in outerwear but also just in bike? I'm curious about that. But also
Mm-hmm.
what went into developing this new product line, and like what were you thinking about in the early days, and then kind of what are the challenges you came along the way? That is a massive ball of a question, so you can take that wherever you want to go.
Well, I will say that we have gotten much better at SKU management because I hired someone who knows better than me. So we hired a product line manager 2 years ago now. And so we have really clear briefing on every single product that we bring in and, also a pretty clear idea of what it might replace or what SKUs might go away as we add new SKUs so that we're not getting too SKU crazy. We set seasonal priorities and as a team, and Dara goes back and does a ton of research on where our gaps are. Is it from a price point standpoint? Is it a tops, a bottoms? Is it a discipline? Where are those gaps and where are those opportunities? Having that really deliberate briefing process has really helped us understand where we're going and where we need to get to as we add new SKUs, especially in existing categories. And then on the outerwear side, I mean, I always knew that we wanted to get into outerwear. There was no question in my mind. It was just a matter of when and how we could assemble the right team to make it exceptional. And so, one of the first things we did was I started recruiting for a contract materials developer. I knew that our team, while very, very good at everything we do, this is a very specialized material set and would likely require a new factory as well. So I wanted to work with someone who has done outerwear at an extremely high level, ideally for a B Corp certified brand or environmentally conscious brand, to help us find or develop the correct materials for our brand and then put all the pieces together with us. So we did end up hiring a really fantastic outside consultant to help us bring this to life. And he worked with us to develop proprietary materials that we felt would be exceptional for women specific products, having a little mechanical stretch so that the outerwear moves with your body rather than being rigid like most outerwear, while still holding up that water protectant layer.
How did you decide what to come out with first? And you can do kind of anything at this point. So maybe tell us what the products are that you're going to launch with in outerwear. And then like, how did you decide, okay, we're going to do this, but we're not going to do that? Like, what did you have to say no to?
We're fortunate because we have a team of very committed mountain enthusiasts, mountain adventurers, especially on the winter sports side. And so we started thinking about, okay, what would our team wear? What will our team be proud of too? Because we needed our team to be fully bought in on this category expansion for it to work. We looked at a lot of the other women's first brands out there who are really leading with fashion and style. And, that's great. And there's absolutely a market for that. We just felt like there was a huge gap for, like more mid to top of the mountain athletes for women, because there weren't any women's first brands doing it. So we're launching with a backcountry oriented kit. So I'd say it's not like it's full of ski mountaineering style kit, but a very versatile kit that's designed to work really well when ski touring, but also not so geeky that you can't wear it on the resort.
Very important.
And so, versatility is a big part of our product ethos as well. And then the other kit is a resort first kit, but still has some of those breathability properties, lightweight properties that you would be very comfortable skiing in the side country, boot packing, getting a little bit of endurance output done in these kits. So those are our two kits to start with, and we'll continue to build out our collection from there. But we just felt like we really needed to start with the core of the ski industry to make an impact. And then no doubt insulation will be down the road as we continue to reach a broader assortment of women.
And I'd imagine that when bringing out a new product line like this, your retail partnerships are really important, and having those early conversations about, hey, we're doing this, we're developing, here's a sneak peek, are you in, are you out? And that really helps you. So I'm curious about and you don't have to give me specifics in the sense of dollars, but in the sense of percentages, like where does things fall in for you from like big box retail, independent retail, and direct to consumer as part of your channel selling? Like what part of your business is each of those categories?
In this outerwear
Just
launch
in
in particular,
in general as
yeah.
Wild Rye.
2025, we should be about 68% D2C, and I think that's about what we're forecasting for this year, and then 32% wholesale. In the past, we've been more wholesale heavy, and REI was a really big part of that, and we're actively trying to balance our business better and find that specialty is really important. We have incredible partnerships with Evo and Title IX and Christie Sports. So, trying to have a healthy, diversified business as we continue to move forward. D2C is really important to us because we can own that story, and we don't have a single retailer who will carry the whole collection, giving people the opportunity to understand the breadth of who we are and also understand who we stand for and why we exist in a more meaningful way beyond what can oftentimes be communicated on a retail floor. So
yeah, important.
But we're working really hard to balance. I mean, no question, retailers are frustrated right now. Brands have been swinging the pendulum pretty heavy towards D2C and breaking MAP policies and heavily discounting to try to get through the COVID hangover. And, we're super committed as we move forward to be better partners to all of our retailers because they add credibility, build community, and allow our our women to touch, feel, and try on product, which is really important to us.
I'm glad you hit on that because that was my next question is, as a professional and an expert in communication from a brand perspective, what do you don't have to talk about what people do wrong. I'd rather hear about what you have done that you feel is like the right way to handle that balance between, wanting to incentivize people to shop with you online while at the same time encouraging, your retailers to continue with you. What do you think is important to communicate from the brand perspective, and maybe not even communicate, but what are the best actions that you take to be that good partner to your retailers?
Mm-hmm. I think it starts with really proactive communication with our retailers, and something that we are working really hard to improve upon, and giving them opportunities to buy in to close out inventory earlier when it's, the right time, and communicating well in advance if we feel like we're going to need to do a flash sale or something that's going to affect their business. We brought on a new national sales manager in January, and already it's been just a huge difference because she's fully dedicated to that retail channel and to supporting our sales reps and, beyond. We're trying to do better about keeping civil things like keeping our dealer locator updated. I mean, as a small team, things get lost in the wayside. They slip through the cracks. It's easy to focus on, some of the bigger retailers that are lower lift and, place larger POs, but it's the backdoor retailers that fix your bike when your chain breaks or whatever happens. Those are the ones that are going to be there for our customers when things go awry. So yeah, equipping them with the right tools to help tell our brand story so that we can tell that full brand story in store. And, we are always excited to support retailer events to help drive people into store. And yeah, it's not perfect. And I'd say that's a weak spot in my own communication that we're working really hard to improve upon.
Yeah. Making progress.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Progress over perfection.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. That's a substantial part of your business is direct to consumer. And there's so many different ways that brands go about doing it. You've built a strong brand, right? And you've built this loyal community. And I think that's the nice thing about having a very strong niche to sell to is that it makes it you kind of clearly defined who your target audience is, and you know how to speak to them very well. If you can look back over the time, it's like, what have been the big things that have allowed you to grow that online customer base? And I know it's kind of like an emergent property. There's all sorts of different things, but if you could pinpoint a few things, you're like, oh, you know what? When we started doing this, or when we started, are there specific things that have allowed you to kind of see that growth?
We've always been very scrappy, and that's something that no matter how big we get, I want our team to continue that scrappy mentality, because for the first 5 years when we had no outside funding, we didn't, and even beyond that, we didn't invest anything into paid advertising. So we weren't investing in Meta or Google at that stage. In the early days, it had a lot, our growth had a lot to do with our PR, social media contests, like all those scrappy things that brands do to build awareness when there aren't dollars to put behind it. I think getting product in the hands of good people, women are very word of mouth centric. So if someone shows up to a ladies' ride in a really cute kit that they love, they're going to talk about it. So getting, product out there in the world has had a snowball effect for us, for sure.
How did you get the product out in the world? Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just curious, how you decide, because I had this conversation with somebody specifically about this yesterday. Like, how did you go about strategically seeding product?
In the early days, it was just like, okay, who in this ski bike world who are friends with me and values aligned in different mountain towns can I send stuff to? Like,
Sure.
That's definitely how it starts. As we've grown, we've had a more, deliberate approach to exactly who and how we define, who we're seeding product to.
Yeah. Friends and family.
We have friends and family, just get it out there, get people loving it, get people talking about it. So, yeah. And I would say that was derived from the Smith model back in the day. I mean, no question. Smith was known for handing out goggles like it was candy. And for the longest time, everyone wore Smith. And, retailers weren't necessarily super stoked about it at times, rightfully so. But it did help grow the brand awareness. And so that's straight out of the Smith playbook. So.
Okay. Yeah. Set aside some budget for don't give it to Mark Zuckerberg. Give it to your future customers.
I was literally just talking to a friend who is a very early stage brand, and she's investing it quite a bit into Meta ads. And I was like, I mean, like, great, but also your product is so good. Get it on people. If you have $3,000 a month to invest in Meta, like, how many pairs of, how many garments is that?
Sure.
Like, get that on people. You have a product that people are going to buy 2, 3, 4 of. So get the first one on people, and then they'll come back and buy more and tell their friends. So I
Yeah, I
don't
think
know.
that people hesitate. I think
That's
because
my
it's,
take on things.
and I'm of the same school for sure. I think sometimes people are, yeah, it's hard to calculate the ROI, and it's a long game. And in those early days, as you know, it sometimes can be scary to like not see it come back immediately and not be able to know if it's working, and you've got to wait 6, 12, 18 months to know and if it's working, and then in the end you just don't even know if it's working. It's just like, are things going up? Is this why? Okay. But
Yeah.
I mean, there's been enough people who've done it successfully by seeding
Yeah.
product that I think the proof's in the pudding for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, you have to go into it knowing that you're not going to get something out of every product that you send out. And, I mean, rightfully so, Katie being the more practical one and me being the more opportunistic brand person, we were at odds with who we sent product to and how much product we sent out in the early days, because we only had so much product to sell, and we needed to sell that product in order to make it to the next year.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. Don't give it all away.
it's totally understandable. But
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, if you would have been doing ads in 2015 to 2020, that was when it was like cheap and easy. Not that we're going to go back there, but now I look at it
no.
and I'm like, oh, I can't believe how customer acquisition costs are bonkers. Now is better.
Yeah.
Now is the time more than ever to go
Yeah,
back to
and
the
I'm
seeding.
grateful that we didn't become reliant on that. I mean,
Sure.
we are, built a foundation that is so much stronger than the algorithm. So
Yeah. I mean, I call it the toll booth, right? Like
Mhm.
if you build your business on that, you're going to be constantly paying that toll booth. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah.
Which brings me to the question about money. All these things take money, right? Building the brand, developing a new outerwear line, building a team. And so I'm curious what, you've kind of referred to it a few times, that you bootstrapped for years and then eventually decided to take on capital. What was the process of starting to bring on capital? Where did you look at? What advice do you have for it? And then what is the future? Because you're kind of in this real growth period. Like, what does the future look like for Wild Rye as far as bringing on investors, and what do you look for in that?
There's not one right answer for us. Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful that we did bootstrap for as long as we could, because I feel like we built a really strong foundation as a result and didn't fall back on the quote, what I see as sort of like the easier options. We hustled, we learned to be scrappy. We built real loyal customers in those early days as a result. And that's continued to grow our customer base. Women in particular, word of mouth is everything. We trust our peers. But yeah, we brought on our first capital in 2021, and that was about a year after I went full on Wild Rye. And I got to a point where I was like, okay, like, I need to pay myself and something's got to give. I need to bring on help. I can't do this alone. And I'd already brought on, I think, my first full-time employee in 2020, fall of 2020. But, I saw the writing on the wall that I was going to be paying her for a long time, and I wasn't going to be able to pay my bills. So I don't think that's the right reason to bring on capital, but I also just saw a huge amount of momentum behind us. We had grown 300% the previous year without having any dollars to invest in things. So it was strike while the iron's hot. We were crushing it, and it was time to harness some of that momentum and put some money behind it. Yeah, I raised a friends and family round then. And then once you're on that hamster wheel, you never get off. So I feel like all I've done is try to raise money ever since. But yeah, and then raise another round that is mostly individuals. I mean, our cap table is exclusively individuals, or yeah, pretty much individuals to date. And that said, we are kicking off our Series A right now and considering, the right types of institutional investors to help us take it to the next level and really scale this thing.
I'm interested in the hamster wheel, and I think Owen Comerford and I were talking about this in the episode I did with him. He said something about which I've never thought about before, is the need to raise the right amount. And you kind of referenced it. Like once you start, you're on the hamster wheel. So it's like, you got to get almost, not more than enough, but you need to get to the right level so that you can actually stop fundraising and start operating the business. So I'm going to guess that based on your hamster wheel analogy, that's the experience you've been in. And then what are you doing? Like, how are you going to get past that so that you're now, you can take it and fly with the money?
I mean, we've never properly capitalized the business. We have incredible investors. We don't, we've got a few larger checks for sure, but it's just been so much work to get a few dollars in the door here and there. And so, yeah, with the Series A, we're looking to bring on a pretty substantial anchor investor who can take up the majority of the round and fill it out with really great people, mix of institutional and additional individuals who believe in the brand and the mission. And it's those individuals that I feel more confident. Well, I feel, confident in both, but those are more my bread and butter, and starting to, tread down the path of institutional investors is scary. It's daunting. It's also something that I think most founders would agree that it's very mysterious and confusing if you haven't been through it before, which anyone on their first brand hasn't been through it before, and exactly what round you're in, and really I think a lot of institutional investors self-identify as venture growth or private equity, and there's a lot of gray area between each of those categories as to exactly what type of capital they are and how they define each of those categories. So, yeah.
Does taking on capital for you change what the future trajectory of the business, meaning at some point those people need to get paid back and they want to see a return on the investment? Does that change how you look at building the brand and like what the future holds for you in that brand compared to where maybe you were thinking earlier prior to taking on capital?
I mean, it's definitely been an internal struggle for me trying to decide how to bring on capital, what type of capital. I've been very fortunate because to date, most of my capital is very patient and has allowed me the time to build this foundation and get to the point where I am comfortable taking on institutional, more traditional capital. But yeah, I mean, there will need to be an exit for our investors at some point. There are certainly multiple ways that you can do that. You can, buy out investors at a certain stage with new capital, or or you can go down the path of acquisition. There's not one way to do that. So I will continue to keep my eyes wide open for the best opportunity for both my investors and for the brand, because this brand has my whole heart, and I don't want an acquisition or a certain capital partner to disrupt that in a way that strips us of what we've built entirely.
Sometimes you hear people, especially in the industry, they get bent out of shape when a business gets acquired and moves on, and they're, it's just like, the core fans get upset and they get judged from the outside. And I always just think like, you have no idea what this founder has been through. And this could be like the greatest day of their life, whether it doesn't matter what you think about the brand that acquired them. You don't know, how it's going to be dealt with and what so it can be hard because for the founder's perspective is like, you want this baby to be taken care of and raised properly. But at the same time, it's like, you got to do what you got to do to move on from all the things all the hard work you've just put into it. I've watched people sell businesses and then get thrown under the bus for it. And you're like, you have no idea.
The emotional struggle that goes on through that. I mean, it's like sending a baby off to college. It's
Sure.
like, it's painful no matter how it goes down. It might still be exciting, but it's still, you're losing a part of yourself. Like, no founder, I can't imagine that any founder doesn't feel a sense of grief when they sell their company, even if they are really excited about it, even if it is the absolute perfect fit and the right fit. But, we pour so much into these brands, and to hand it off to someone else is always going to lead to grief. Yeah. And
my favorite stories are, it happened with Prana. I think it just happened with Kona bikes, is when the founder sells it and then buys it
And
back
buys it
for
back.
less
Yeah.
and then sells it again for more. Kona hasn't sold it again for more, but Prana definitely has sold it for more. And that was like an amazing story. But to
You
me,
know,
it's
my
just like,
dad did that.
oh,
My
really?
dad was my dad was an entrepreneur. He started a chocolate company in Seattle when I was 8, and he sold it, and the new owner started to tank it, and he bought it back, and then he sold it again. I don't know that he made much money on it, to be honest, but
Sure.
he did do the buyback situation, and so I lived through that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll go on public record saying I'm not buying back the business I just sold.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Good.
I love the business; it's great, but I have other things I want to do now.
Mhm.
So winding down a little bit, I have some questions for you, kind of about your personal journey as a CEO, and I'm curious, what have been the best resources for you in your journey as a CEO?
I have a lot. I
Rattle
have
them
a
off.
lot. I'm not afraid to reach out to my network for anything. So I would say my network is the best resource that I have in like broad terms. I certainly have some factions within the broader network. I have a group of ski industry women that I have been on a text chain with since 2016, I want to say. And we get together every year and share our wins, our desires, what we're grateful for, and all of the pain and suffering, which, we're privileged people. So it's not that deep. But yeah, I mean, this group of women has been there for me for as a human being for the longest time. And having this industry group, and many of the women are still in the industry. Some have moved on to beyond the industry and are doing new things, but having that support and that cheerleading squad behind me has been invaluable. I was let's see what else. I was Troy Birch Foundation fellow, and the timing was absolutely perfect because I was welcomed into that community in spring of 2020. You know what happened in spring of 2020. So that was a great time to be in a community of women. And it was a good time to be outside the outdoor industry too. Yeah. It was like a mini MBA program that I wouldn't have had, I wouldn't have learned a lot of these things without trial and error and scrapping it together without this program. Title IX has put together a really great group of female founders. All the founders who have won their Pitch Fest over the years continue to stay connected. And I mean, Title IX as a retailer, Missy Park, the founder of Title IX, and our merchandisers and, their community manager, they are there for anything. I mean, I called one of them just 2 days ago and was like, okay, how are you negotiating with your factories about tariffs? Like, what is the angle? What is the thing, the hook that's going to get them to buy in to sharing some of the costs? And so having those resources is incredible. And then I also have to give a shout out to Pete Labor, who's the CEO of Christie Sports. He has been a longtime advisor to me. We talk probably close to monthly, ebbs and flows, but he's been an incredible support for me. Mel Strong of Next Ventures as well. I mean, she's an angel investor in Wild Rye. She's a former Nike exec. Anyways, you probably weren't asking me to rattle off names, but there are some individuals who have made this journey much easier. And then I would be remiss to not mention my VP of People and Ops here at Wild Rye. She's like she's my rock. She does all the things I'm bad at and has sat with me as I've cried my eyes out about this, that, or the other thing, and just been the most solid presence in my life through Wild Rye, everything.
Sounds like you have some good people in your life.
A lot. I'm missing a lot too. So
That's
sorry,
okay.
guys. I love you all.
I'm really curious
Appreciate
about
you.
this text group that's been 10 years in the making. Was it formalized, or was it just friends saying, hey, we should do this, and now it just keeps going?
Yeah, so we were a group of women who were all at Powder Week with Powder Magazine's hosted Ski Test when Powder Magazine was still doing Powder Week back in the day. And, I think there were like 15 or 20 women there out of 100 people. And we were like, okay, this is crazy. First of all, there are so few women in this group. And we need to find a way to stay together because we are just seeing women drop out of the ski industry as they go on to have kids and move along in their lives. And so we decided that we should get together and figure out what this should be. And, we had some good energy behind being something. We weren't sure what. It never quite materialized. So now it's just a text group and Camp Lady Shred every year. So we get together and we do some outdoor activities and share what's going on in our lives and where we need support. So no, it's not formal.
Good for you. That's
Very
amazing.
informal.
Yeah, the world
Yeah.
needs more of that. That's really good.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think has been your superpower as an entrepreneur?
Being well aware of my weaknesses. I wouldn't say I don't have ego, because I certainly have ego, but I'm also really not afraid to admit what I'm bad at. And I've been able to hire for my weaknesses as a result, or find advisors who can fill some of those gaps. Yeah, I would say that is number one. I would say number two is just having really strong conviction. I think that's a lot of what's made Wild Rye great, is that we have a strong stake in the ground for what we believe in. And we're unwaveringly a brand for women, and for the whole woman. So from women in business, reproductive health care, women in the outdoors, supporting women through motherhood, so all the phases of life.
Because I know you're a fan of How I Built This, I'm going to ask
Mm-hmm.
you the classic How I Built This question. So how much do you attribute to luck and how much do you attribute to hard work?
Oh, I'm going to take the easy way out. It's definitely both. Like, the one cannot exist without the other. I've worked hard to put myself in positions that allow me to get lucky, and building the right network and timing, and it all plays into this. And so, yeah, I would say it's a very healthy mix of luck and hard work, and everything that's gone wrong, I'm grateful for. I've learned a lot. I wouldn't say I'm lucky for all those things, but it's certainly allowed me to go into future phases eyes wide open.
Yeah. I mean, back to your whole idea of knowing your weaknesses and really knowing that the balance is luck and hard work combined. I think I'm convinced right now that the most important skill for an entrepreneur is self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that you are very self-aware, and I can tell that it served you well.
Yeah, I am, mostly. I'm sure my team will tell you that I come in guns blazing and then have to take a step back and become self-aware sometimes.
So then you're self-aware because you went through the process.
True. Yes.
Right. Because if you just come in there's a lot of people who just come in guns blazing and leave guns blazing, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a lack of self-awareness.
Exactly.
Good for you. So how do you define success for yourself? That's the loaded question I ask everybody at the end of the podcast, just to set them on their heels as we end.
Yeah. That's such a good question, and there's so many layers.
We got time.
Mm-hmm. For me personally, to my core, I want to make an impact, and I want to make an impact on the community around me for the better. So I want to leave this earth, humanity, better than I found it. And right now it's feeling a little harder, a little more headwind, but that's it from a personal standpoint. As a business person, yeah, I want Wild Rye to be great and successful financially, and the more financial success we have, the bigger impact we're going to be able to make. And so I'd say those two in tandem are how I would define success. Yeah. And then, of course, there's health and family as well.
Yeah.
And having fun.
Having fun.
I want to have fun the whole way through it.
Yeah.
There are down days, but
I wish you more of it. And it seems like from the outside, as far as making an impact, I mean, things that we didn't even talk about is Women-Led Wednesdays. That's your brainchild. You talked about reproductive health for women, like the things that you've said that no other brand I've seen take such a stance on social issues in the outdoor industry. So you're doing it. Like I can see that part of you coming out in your brand, and that's amazing as a founder that you get to live that personal goal out into your brand.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And Wild Rye at Rampage. We didn't even talk about Red Bull Rampage. Wow.
Oh yeah. So many things.
I remember seeing the banner in the finish pit there. I was like, oh my, wow. Okay. So you can listen to the Second Nature podcast. You should definitely listen to Cassie talk on the Second Nature podcast, dear listener, about all that Wild Rye at Rampage. Is very cool.
Yeah.
So
it's
as we
very
close
cool.
up, where should people come and learn more about Wild Rye? Where can you send them? What could they be looking forward to?
Follow us on Instagram. I think it's at wild_rye_. This stems back to the name. It was the name change, but and then wild-rye.com are the best places to find us directly, and then shop us at your local retailer. Check out our dealer locator to find any of our specialty retailers near you: REI, Title IX, Evo, Christie Sports.
Well, thanks so much, Cassie, and we look forward to seeing where Wild Rye goes in the future.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for listening all the way to the end of this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend you think may enjoy it too. You could also take a few seconds to subscribe to the podcast. Anything you do to help share the love here, we'd appreciate it. Thanks so much for following along, and we'll see you next time.